Welcome to In the Loop. Welcome back, everybody. This is the second half of a two-part episode that features Katie Kinlaw, who's the digital marketing manager at Punchmark, and Evelyn Stetzer, who's the integrated brand strategist at the Smithee Group. And we're discussing organic content and how to elevate your social strategy for success. Again, this is the second half. So the first half was in the episode before this, episode 4. But in this one, we cover outbound versus inbound and what that means, influencer strategy, and kind of give an overview of how social fits into your consumer journey. This episode is brought to you by Punchmark, the jewelry industry's leading website provider. Join the community of nearly 500 other jewelry stores in choosing Punchmark's easy-to-run and e-commerce enabled website platform by visiting punchmark.com for your free trial demo. And this episode is brought to you by the Smithee Group, a digital growth agency that helps leaders and businesses dream bigger and achieve multi-generational integrity. Through insights and intelligence, digital marketing, and advertising solutions, they help businesses expand their business and grow their revenue. The Smithee Group has helped hundreds of businesses surpass their goals and believe that whatever your business, whatever your story, they'll make it matter to your audience. So everybody, just to recap, this episode is actually the second part of a two-part episode. If you haven't listened to that one, you should go back and listen to it. If you're listening to the recording, definitely go back and do that right now. If you're in the live broadcast, go back after. But what do you guys think, Evelyn and Katie? Maybe we can recap really quickly in just a minute or two what we covered in the first one.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll hop in. So last week we talked about what should I post on my social media? And of course, that starts with understanding that your social platforms, be it Facebook or Instagram or YouTube or Pinterest, are not a vacuum. They are an arm of your larger business and your business goals. So it really starts with understanding what you're pushing forward for that quarter, for that year, and making sure it aligns with everything else you're doing because it will feed into your larger social strategy.
Nice. Yeah. And we got into a lot of talk about how is it better to shoot from the hip kind of thing, or is it better to plan everything out? I'm a big fan of content calendars kind of running my life because if I go day to day, I end up forgetting stuff. I think that Katie had mentioned, sometimes it's better to have some things that are organic, but also sometimes it's better to have your pieces planned out and also kind of have a big driving idea behind it.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like, again, recapping that it's important to have an understanding, as you're going into the larger quarters of the year, to have those larger pushes already kind of organized. And then I feel like in between, obviously, you're going to have some lulls, focus on the macro pieces and the evergreen pieces that are really going to drive a lot of engagement throughout the year. And then, really make sure that you're planning for those larger pushes again as you go into Q4 and things of that nature. So absolutely.
So again, that's just a very brief overview of last episode. You guys can go listen to that. It's episode 4. So now let's start talking about how the execution can be done on these social posts and pieces like that. For example, what do you guys think is required for the team strategy? Do you think that you need to have one person running this? Do you think you should have multiple people running it? Does the owner or the kind of the stakeholder of the brand need to be involved, or is it kind of best to remove them from that?
Yeah, I've seen the most success when there's more than one person in the room and there's a little bit of group think. I'm sure you agree, Katie. We're both shaking our heads here, but I know that it's a lot of responsibility for one person to be in charge of the social media. And even me, when I, back in college, was running a social media, but wasn't on the leadership team for my sorority, I had no idea what dates the events were. And that just kind of was a small example of how, having the owner in the room or able to just give a little bit more voice to that strategy makes things a lot more cohesive.
Yeah, for sure. And I definitely agree. I think that obviously the structure is going to look different depending on the staff that you have. But, making sure that there is one consistent person that is going to be, the person that's making sure that everything is running smoothly. But I think it's important also to have those other stakeholders within the actual company to make sure that you're in line with business goals as well. So whether it's just, one person and getting some feedback from the rest of the team, or whether it's one person working with a group of other people to take the photos and schedule everything. I think, as long as you have that cohesion with your business goals, and that's what's, most important.
I see. Yeah, just having someone kind of knowing at least how it fits into the big picture, I guess, is probably what I'm getting out of that. I definitely know that when it comes to running a social media platform or just one, it can be really overwhelming just to kind of settle it on from one person, and it kind of just becomes so arduous because social media can be a part of your personal life as well. And I know that we had talked about this when we were planning for this, and how much, just know if you saddle one of your employees with running all of your social media, it can also have an impact on the rest of their life. Like people use social media like Instagram and Facebook for personal things. So it can also kind of start to poison that part of their life as well. Just something to keep an eye on, I think. Not that that should be your utmost concern, but something to keep in the back of your head.
Yeah, I think it's super important to talk about social media and how to approach it with wisdom. And last time we talked about anchor content and wanted to extrapolate more on what supporting in micro looked like. And honestly, the main bottom line of that is just how do you save time and posting in real time. Sometimes it's important. Like there's a dog that came to the store and you need to post about it because that's like, you gotta. Real time stuff is great. But, I say sometimes that real time can waste time if you're only running shoot from the hip all the time. So just to break down a little bit more for the people that are watching the live show right now, that I see new people that we didn't have on the show last week and just want to give you a little snippet. The anchor content is really thinking about those big drivers, big blog ideas, or big Instagram TV videos. You spend a lot of time on them. And then you break them into smaller things and post them throughout the month. So that's supporting content where, you're taking the 5 points from the blog and you're breaking them down to the 5 individual posts. And that'll really just help you save time in slating out your calendar and making sure that you don't overwhelm one person, or also that you're kind of makes sense. You're trying to tell a story, you're trying to keep people following along. And overall, it just has more cohesive flow when you post that way.
Definitely. And no more photos of rings on carrots and celery.
Yes.
Big no. So let's get into just some, again, best practices. We talked about best practices for the overall kind of idea. So coming up with a strategy and then a calendar and then kind of tailoring it into each other. Let's talk about actual execution. A lot of these things are going to tie into Instagram. It seems to be the platform of choice. Instagram and Facebook kind of go hand in hand. They're both owned by Facebook, so whatever. But I'm sure that it can also extend to Twitter. It can also extend to, if you're big on IGTV, or a couple of those other spots. But let's talk about best times to be posting, best practices. What do you guys got?
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like before you can really figure out what your content calendar looks like, and then from there, how you're going to schedule, I think you first have to identify the specific buyer personas and the individual type of people that you're really targeting. I've worked with clients in the past where obviously a lot of their bread and butter is going to be bridal, but they also, focus on larger custom pieces, or maybe they work with people women that maybe are outside of the millennial demographic, are a little bit older. They're, self-purchasing, right? So I think determining what those business goals are and then who that specific demographic is, because their buying patterns are going to look a little bit different. And then from there, figuring out how to tailor what they're doing to be more geared towards that, I think is ultimately going to lead you up for success.
Right. And even taking that thought and running with it, I know that every different age group interacts with social media differently and different platforms differently. So that will inform, what time you post at. And we're going to get into some tools, but there are tools to help you track what's the hottest time for the most number of users on your profile. And that might seem a little creepy and big brothery, but it's actually really helpful and insightful to make you're in people's feeds at the right time so they can engage quickly with it. And if they engage quickly with it, then the algorithm will pick up on that and start drawing your post higher in people's feeds, and overall give that post a longer breath, a longer life is what we call it here at TSG. How do you give it wings and let it fly into the media and not let it be hidden with only 2 likes? So best times will really save you time as well, because maybe then you only need to post 3 or 4 times a week instead of every single day, because a post will keep showing up in people's feeds if it's engaged with properly. So I follow a few beauty brands that gave me some insight into when's the best time to post that anchor content, that longer video that your store team took time to plan out to shoot. You didn't talk to customers so you could get away and get in a quiet spot and shoot this video. We want that to have a good life. So I've noticed that brands post those longer pieces over the weekend and see more traction on them because, there's more time for scrolling. There's more time to watch a longer video. Of course, make sure you have captions on it, because then you'll have more chance of people listening to it or watching it instead of listening to it. You never know who's reading instead of listening. So I've noticed that works really well.
Nice.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like there's obviously very generic, times that you could say typically during the weekday, normally around lunchtime, I feel like is kind of like a standard, if you don't have any data to go off of, I feel like that's a pretty safe time zone to fit in because most people are on their lunch break, they're scrolling on their phone. So, if you're not sure and you don't have some of that data, I think that that's always a good place to start.
I think that also Instagram should give you some moderate analytics on this. I think that, do you, as a best practice, suggest that they turn their Instagram account into a business profile? Because I've heard some people say that, you should because you get access to the analytics, or you should not because they might shadow ban you because they want you to pay for those viewerships.
100% recommend turning it into a business profile. I've actually never heard the shadow banning thing. But what we know from working with people in the Facebook ads manager side is that you have to be a business profile in order to run Instagram ads.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Instead of boosting your posts natively on Instagram, we actually see way better targeting capabilities. I know they're updating this on the front end of Instagram, but from our experience, you can break out the best targeting and budget in the back end of Facebook Ads Manager. So you have to connect them by making your profile a business profile.
Yeah. And I think if you just start poking around, or you have an employee who feels comfortable, getting that on there, I think giving, again, like we had just mentioned, giving the profile to a couple of members of your staff so that you can diversify it, it allows you to do that. And then you can start being a little bit more active instead of just giving it just to one person. But you mentioned some tools. What do you guys recommend as far as utilizing tools to start being, again, giving some wings to these posts?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like from my experience, there's obviously a breadth of tools that you can utilize. There are essentially two main ones that I would recommend when it comes to like researching for social and making your life a little easier. I feel like Hootsuite is one that I really recommend, or, some similar softwares that essentially allow you to integrate your social profile and schedule posts ahead of time. I really love that quote, that she said in terms of like, making real time just like waste time, and how can you really utilize, the work that you're doing to the best of your ability. You don't want to have to set an alarm on your phone and say, oh, I've got to post this at, noon on a Friday. These softwares allow you to, again, sync up your social, as well as like put all of the graphics, all of the hashtags, all of the copy that goes with it. It saves you time. I feel like that's probably the number one tool. It is something that you do have to pay for. I don't believe it's extremely expensive. I don't want to give out numbers, but it's, I believe, under $20 a month, which I feel like if you're going to be active on social, that it may make sense for you.
Just need one post. Yeah, just need one conversion off that, and you pay for your entire year, basically.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So that's number one. And then number two, I know we may talk about this a little bit more in depth, but how to like research like the posts that are doing well and like research like hashtags. There's one software that I really like to use called BuzzSumo that I feel like has a lot of really engaging reports that allows you to like type in a keyword or type in a hashtag to see which posts have gotten the most engagement, and like related hashtags that are also, getting a lot of engagement as well.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Katie. One thing we use here is called later.com. And I mean, the name speaks for itself. It's just posting something later while you're sitting there and typing it all out. And this is the gold mine for content creators, especially if you're wanting to do everything kind of systematically. That's something that I think some creative energy doesn't always allow for that. You think you're like inhibiting, being spontaneous, but I actually find like consistency is really what allows room for creativity. So if you hear anything you need to tell your social media manager and your team from this podcast, just help them develop a system, help them create a Google Doc with all their hashtags that they're using and all the research that Katie just mentioned, and then start copying and pasting things together one by one. Do all your copy in one shot, place 2 weeks at a time. All of that helps you get really quick and creative with your calendar because you notice like, oh, I missed that. And so the fun part about later.com is as you post, it starts to learn your profile. So it'll allow you in the analytics dashboard to see what was the highest engaged post over time, what hashtags gave you the most impressions and reach and follows and saves. And you can really look at every single metric you want to and decide internally as a team, what is your KPI? What is the thing you're going for? So if you're doing a campaign and you really want to get RSVPs, make sure you're looking at those website clicks through your profile. Later also allows you to create a link in bio. So you have that little thing in your profile that'll diversify the links you can use behind your posts, which is also really important. I can't wait for the day when Instagram allows you to put links in a caption and it actually clicks off to something. That will be the best day in social media manager history. But until then, we're gonna update our link in our bio to make sure there's something for people to click off to. So I find that really helpful. And I could go on and on about later, but it really is less than $10 a month to have one profile on there and be able to schedule things out automatically.
So hashtags, I feel like, if we're going to talk about social media management and execution, people just want to hear us talk about hashtags, it seems like. And one thing that people always are asking, is it better to go for the broad ones? So should you be hashtagging jewelry, or should you be getting a little bit more niche, like jewelry design or engagement ring design or something like that? Do you have any suggestions if there's like a post threshold they should be under? Is it like the 1 million hashtags or the 10,000 ones that's better?
Yeah, we kind of created a little bit of a science, because there is a science to hashtags, and THG just has some best practices from what we've seen work to get better reach. And what we found is having different tiers within your hashtag paragraph.
Gotcha.
And don't use the same hashtags on every post. That's like a big no-no, because it'll start to like hide your post because it knows that you're using the same thing. Yeah. It knows. Instagram is looking at your profile and seeing its behavior. And the bottom line of this conversation is that Instagram rewards things that look human. So if you're copying and pasting the same number of hashtags every time, this is my disclaimer to say, make sure you're diversifying that. So how do you do that? First, pick a tier of the most popular ones. So from the 1 to 2 million range of posts that have used that hashtag, and then start getting more niche over time within that same paragraph on your post. So 15,000 to 20,000, or 100 to 200, or, within the hundreds or in the low thousands range. Just make a range, but then always use your brand hashtag too. So you have a pool of posts for your own store.
Nice. And Katie, what are some real analytics that these people should at least just hand to their social media managers and say, okay, I want to start tracking these things? Like, what are the ones that you suggest that they just start keeping track of?
So you mean just in terms of social media in general?
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. So I think that there are some kind of standard basic ones that you should be focusing on, in terms of, I feel like there's also a differentiation between paid social as well as organic social. Impressions is going to be a big one. How many times your ad was actually looked at organically, obviously comments, interactions, if there is a call to action, whether a link in bio, whatever the case is, to kind of keep a pulse on those metrics. And then from there, I think you have to look at the marketing funnel in general, right? And is the post specifically for people that are at the top of the funnel? So it's something maybe a little bit more general, a little bit more broad, something kind of middle of the funnel so people already kind of know who you are? Or is it very specific and very niche? I think that depending on what the post is about is really going to determine what you're really looking at in terms of KPIs and the success of the post overall.
Nice. So really quickly, we're going to take a quick break and we'll come back in about 30 seconds or after this ad. Shopping for jewelry can be expensive, and buying the perfect piece on a monthly budget can be a big ask. And that's why we're excited to introduce this episode's sponsor, Sezzle. Sezzle is an alternative payment option that allows shoppers to buy now and pay later by splitting their purchase into 4 interest-free installments. Merchants are paid upfront in full, and orders can ship right away. Adding Sezzle as a checkout option is proven to increase sales, conversions, basket sizes, and purchase frequency for merchants. Consumers love the flexibility and pay no interest or added fees. And they integrate seamlessly with Punchmark websites, which is pretty cool. If you'd like to join over 16,000 merchants taking advantage of the benefits Sezzle has to offer, and exclusively for In the Loupe listeners, go to get.sezzle.com/Loupe, that's Loupe, and enjoy your first month free as an exclusive In the Loupe offer. Thanks, and back to the show. We'll come back. So let's talk about outbound versus inbound. You guys, I feel have these terms that you guys understand, and I am a lowly designer and I don't understand. So explain to me outbound versus inbound and give me kind of an overview of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we're probably going to do a whole episode on community engagement because it is so important. But this is really where, we talked about how to keep your content fresh and up and date as part of the topic for this 2-part podcast. And that is the number one way I see our team at TSG keeping up to date is by doing outbound engagements. Think of outbound as in like what's going out your door, and then think of inbound about what's coming in your door. So if you're going out and commenting on things, researching new hashtags, finding new accounts to follow, commenting on things and watching stories and interacting with them, that would be considered outbound because it's your brand knocking on someone else's door. So that's outbound engagement. And then inbound engagement is the steady stuff that comes in your door. So comments, likes, saves, all those things, people sharing your post, that's the stuff that will come into you. And so making sure you reply to that thing would be an inbound engagement.
Yeah,
Very
absolutely.
Cool.
And I think that it's so important, obviously, to have both of them to work together. I've seen, at least on my personal feed, I have a couple of brands that I really like to look at and how they kind of, do their own personal, marketing for their own business. And I think that Warby Parker actually does a really great job of that, especially in terms of like having that good mix, and the way that they kind of structure their feed and, how they interact with their, clients actually on social media too is really cool because they have like different segments like on their Instagram stories and they have like specific themes for the week. And they're like, okay, today we're going to talk about how to pick the perfect pair of glasses for you. And then they'll actually like interact with their website and they'll showcase certain products. And then they'll also like open it up for their users too. And so they can actually interact with them while also kind of curating that conversation. So I think that there's definitely lots of different ways that you can encourage, both that inbound and outbound as well.
Yeah. Isn't that the best when you see a comment replied to a brand and then they comment back and say something that's like long, thoughtful, insightful. And you're like, oh man, I want to like engage with this brand more now. I trust them more because they took clienteling opportunities seriously.
I definitely agree. You're seeing it more and more. People like people and they like brands that act like people. What are the brands that like, right when I close my eyes, like what brands can I think of that act like people? I think of Wendy's. I think of Apple. If you could close your eyes and think of brands that have a personality, you can, of course, which ones they are. Like, what is the personality of like, I don't know, like even Bank of America or Wells Fargo? They don't really have a personality. But the brands that do, really, I feel like they reach out and as a result, it's got that loyalty and why are you coming back over and over, even if there is an option that's different. So I definitely agree.
Yeah. And you mentioned earlier having like multiple people responsible for social media. And I think that's so true because you need someone looking at the data, you need someone driving the strategy, you need someone doing the manual posting, someone photographing, all the above. But one thing that's non-negotiable is having a clear brand voice and having a really, really consistent presence on social media when it comes to how your captions sound and how everything's formatted even. And maybe that's just me being type A.
Evelyn, what do you mean by a voice? I feel like voice can mean a lot of different things to different people. What do you mean by that specifically?
Yeah, I think it's a brand persona. So how do they look, sound, and feel? And what do they value? So you can tell a lot by how someone, values people by how they say, hi, so-and-so, thanks for your time commenting about this piece. Or you can tell someone's passion if they say like, this piece of jewelry is this price, and they're not describing the piece at all. You can say, thanks for your interest in this beautiful 14-karat gold yellow necklace. We handcrafted it with you in mind, right? That shows passion. So your brand persona should not only communicate something about how kind you are, how welcoming you are, but also like what you value. And honestly, those brand persona values will most likely be hand in hand with what your team talks about as customer service. When you're talking with someone, make sure that they know that all couples are welcome at this store, right? Bottom line things that they talk about how to treat people and how the team should carry themselves. Your social media should also have that same rules of etiquette and also be front and center.
Yeah. Like, are you big and boisterous? Are you, passionate? Are you witty? Those are all different kind of routes you could go down. I think in the end, if you're like, I don't think we have any of that, maybe it's worth consulting with an expert to just pick a direction. It's kind of like a skill tree in a game. That probably went over a lot of people's heads, but that's okay. So we had a question about outbound marketing and specifically, how do you keep the numbers of followers versus following level? You had a kind of sneaky tip that I'd never heard of. What do you got for Natalie?
Okay, so hi, Natalie. I talked about this with our team when we were prepping for this episode. That's something that I've seen work pretty well, actually, is not following new profiles, but following hashtags. Because honestly, it's a game of perception with your ratio of following to followers. Someone can come to your profile and be like, oh, they just, follow people to get a follow back. And that is honestly such a hard game to win. So sometimes I just keep the following really low, follow, like-minded profiles, or if you're a local jewelry store, follow things in your area, things that build your credibility, and then keep the people that are personal follows to your account to a minimum, unless they're a super VIP customer and you want to comment on everything they're doing, or it's a couple that just got engaged from your store. Yeah, follow them and encourage them because they'll become repeat purchasers. But otherwise, just go through and follow your top performing hashtags. So round diamonds, or I hate to say it, but sparkle is a real good hashtag. These days, sometimes you're like, why is this performing well?
Sparkle.
Yeah, making notes. Yeah, just okay. Yeah. That's fascinating. I think that those are kind of the little tricks I feel like that if you don't have to work harder, you just got to work a little bit smarter, I think is kind of goes into it. So another one is that there's been a lot of talk about influencers, and personal feelings aside about influencing marketing, do you think specifically about jewelry, but also in the large, how do you guys feel about influencer marketing?
Yeah, I feel like it works really well for the brands that it works really well for, right?
Fair.
I think a great example would be a lot of fast fashion companies too. I feel like Fashion Nova or Boohoo, if you're familiar with them, I think they're based out of the UK. It's how can you really find that specific niche? And I feel like influencers work really well for those kinds of pieces, right? It's the cost of the actual product itself. I feel like it's a little bit lower, it's easier, to kind of have that conversation, and encourage, use this code for 10% off. I feel like there's some value in that for some industries and some it works really well. I feel like for jewelry in particular, it's so difficult because realistically, online purchases typically fall with, under a certain dollar value, right? Normally it's going to be a lot of fashion jewelry, some engagement rings as well, right? But they're not typically the higher end engagement rings that are going to be sold e-commerce as well. So if you're trying to drive e-com, that may not be as effective, so that's at least my initial 2 cents that, yes, it works for some, but maybe not so much for jewelry.
Yeah, there's a brand called Daniel Wellington that I have a friend that works there, and they, give codes to influencers, and that works really well because they're an international brand and people can only shop online. And then, like Katie's saying, you got to think about your audience. So if you're a local jewelry store, maybe redefine what influencer is. We think of, the young millennial who, is young and fit and has, good style. And it's okay, but influencing can be anybody. So is there a woman who's in her 30s to 40s range who is really prominent in, the school system, or is really prominent in, or has another job that, tons of women work with her too. And, she wears a bracelet from your store every single day and has a faithful presence for your brand and talks about that you guys gave good customer service. Maybe that will influence more people to come into your store. So just redefine what an influencer is and think about every single person that comes into your door, interacts with you on social media, could become a spokesperson or an influencer for your brand.
Yeah. And again, another thing to keep in mind is jewelry is kind of a romantic love aside. I mean, romantic as in you kind of want to get caught up in this piece of jewelry. And what kind of ruins that? Is it facade? The feeling is knowing that other people have that same piece. And look, fast fashion, the bad parts aside and the good parts aside, is an impulse buy a lot of the times. Why do you want to have that particular shirt as opposed to the shirt you already have? It's because it looks good and now I just bought it. But jewelry, I feel like there is something missing there. So I'm not saying don't use influencers. It's just maybe using it smarter. And like Evelyn had mentioned, maybe a person in your community. People get so caught up in follower count, they have to have over 1,000 or 10,000 or whatever the number is. Think about that person in your community, because that's where a lot of your purchases are going to be coming from. Maybe just tapping them for rewarding them, hitting them with a code or something, asking them, maybe mention you on whatever their platform is, where that piece around, and suddenly your bang for your buck is going to go much better, I think. So I guess that kind of ties into our last topic, I think. And that is going to be this consumer journey. So let's tie up these past 2 episodes into one big ball of wax. And that is kind of, where does social media tie into the consumer journey? And maybe we even want to just go super basic. And what is the consumer journey, and what does that actually mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And, kind of tying back into what I mentioned earlier in regards to like the marketing funnel, right? It really is kind of segmented into 3 pieces, right? So top of the funnel, middle of the funnel, and bottom of the funnel. So top of the funnel is going to be traffic that is maybe a little bit less qualified, right? So someone that is not really familiar with your brand. Middle of the road is going to be, people that are a little bit more familiar, whereas the bottom of the funnel is going to be someone that's had multiple touch points with your business and your brand. And people at the bottom of the funnel, most of the time, are the largest percentage that's actually going to convert for you, right? Even though, obviously the farther you get down the funnel, the smaller, that overall total is, but it has a much higher, in terms of conversion rate. So we have to look at how can we move them through that process, top of the funnel all the way down to the bottom. And ultimately, it's about an integrated online strategy. When we're talking about, your digital presence, it's going to be like, for example, if you see someone post on social media, and maybe, you get retargeted on Facebook with that same product that you looked at, or maybe, it was word of mouth from someone, or you saw someone wear a really nice bracelet, and then you hear, a radio spot about this particular, brand, right? Like there's going to be multiple instances where you're going to, hit by different touch points. And there's actually some really interesting reports in Google Analytics that allows you to see from an e-commerce purchase the actual like movement of that customer journey, right? What was the first touch point? Did they see you through a Google search? Then did they see your post on social? And then did they, search for you, directly? So it's a combination of all of these different things coming together to support that end goal, which is going to be, either an online purchase or them ultimately interacting with your brand in store as well.
Yeah, I was going to tie this back to influencers because I told our team on this call a story.
Do tell.
About, I was looking through some old videos on my phone and just posted a story on Instagram about a concert, tagged the artist, was expecting nothing, was just doing it to, share something lighthearted. And the artist, who has 250 followers on Instagram, reposted my story in their Instagram story feed. And I was like, whoa, cool. And then, you would expect that all this traffic would start coming to my own personal Instagram profile. But I only noticed like an uptick of maybe 5 people that watched that story. Because, you can scroll through and see if you recognize the names. And I was wondering, I was like, this is exactly why I wonder about influencer marketing and how effective it is. But in the sense that, maybe when an influencer or someone shares from your profile, they come to your profile, and then we don't know what happens after that. Like Katie is saying, they could have gone and searched my name on Google to try to find me on another platform. So maybe they saw your name on Instagram and had this familiarity spark, and they Googled you. Is your Google set up then to support them wanting to discover more about you? So that's really the strategy behind all of this. Not to dog on influencer marketing, but it really is just one tiny piece of this larger puzzle to make sure you have a really strong and consistent presence on all platforms, so that no matter what someone first sees about you, that it's consistent with what they would find on your website. And here at the Smithee Group, and I'm sure Punchmark's going to love me saying this, but like we view the website as home base. So the website should be, yes.
Nice.
Yes. The website should have the most information about you. It should funnel the most traffic toward it. And all the profiles should kind of like plunge people towards discovering more about you and purchasing on your site. And then hopefully coming into the store too. So hopefully that traffic translates to some in-store and online sales.
Yeah. I mean, if you can't picture a funnel in your mind, picture instead like, again, romanticize it. It's kind of like going on a date. It's like, yes, maybe you go and you just meet someone, you get introduced to them, and you go and you start dating them. Or maybe you run into them at a bar, and then you go to a party and you meet them there, and then you have a conversation, and then you have coffee, and then you start dating them. It's the romance is a little bit kind of along the way. It's the chase. And that is the exact same thing about how you can look at your actual purchasing methods and your purchasing online marketing style. And social media is one piece of that whole thing. So you've got your website, you've got your social presence, and then you have your products and all of the other pieces. So having all those kind of working in harmony, and that's how you romanticize this purchase and actually drive the end goal, which is the conversion. So I don't know if that goes off topic, if that even helps. Maybe we'll cut that out in the end.
Great. No, it's great. Something we say is like, okay, you got one purchase, but how do we make repeat purchasers? How do we make people that are loyal to brands so that they cherish you and start collecting items? And how do we start speaking to them? So that's where like the fun retargeting comes in. If someone has been a purchaser from you before, how do you talk to them specifically and break that out in your targeting for ads and your specific language towards them, saying like, this is just for you, your exclusive thing. So viewing that as part of your funnel too. Let's put them back at the top all over again and romance them all the way down. That's love, that's marriage. That's like,
there you go.
Keep dating them for life. So
I love it. Guys, I think we'll call it right there. Thanks everybody for listening. The next live show will be September 10th, and it's covering how to get your social media numbers to reach new heights. It's again with guests Katie Kinlaw from Punchmark and Aaron from the Smithee Group. We have a live show the week before these broadcasts, and when you're on, you can ask questions of the guests and kind of interact with us. We also have a special post-show recap where we talk a little bit more in depth about our feelings about the topic, which can be interesting. Special thanks to Sezzle for sponsoring this week's episode. You can find out more information and register for Sezzle by going to get.sezzle.com/Loupe. That's Loupe. Thanks everybody. See you next time. Bye.